Good morning, everybody. Before we start the meeting, I've got to read the safety announcements. The building fire alarm signal is a continuous two-tone alarm. On hearing the evacuation alarm, leave the building by the nearest marked exit. Follow the green signs to the assembly point, which is a large staff car park opposite the entrance to the building. Anyone who can't use the stairs will be helped by officers present after other people have left. Do not return to the building until it's safe to do so by an authorised officer. The whole of the council site is a no smoking area. Mobile phones must be switched to silent or preferably off, please. Good morning. This is a meeting of the liquor licensing panel. I'm the chairman of the panel, Councillor Bruce Forbes. The other members are Councillor Janice Enwood and Clive LeBand. Could I ask you to identify yourself, please, so we go around the room?
Certainly, Chair. I'm John Bryant, the Senior Licensing Officer.
Thank you, Councillor. Michael Bateman, Licensing Food and Safety Team Leader.
My name is Gerard Conway. I'm an interested party and a Cookfield resident.
I'm Paul Smythe.
Right, now speak. Now speak.
Paul Smythe, proprietor of Cookfield Golf Centre.
Nicholas Smythe, Director and Applicant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Paul Vickers, solicitor advising the panel.
Right, thank you. We go to the agenda. Item 1, to receive apologies for absence. I don't think we have any. Item 2, to declare interest for members in respect of any matter on the agenda. There's none. I have to read out the procedure for the licence panel will follow considering the application set out in the Licensing Act 2003 in attendant regulation, and it was agreed by the Licensing Committee on the 2nd of February 2005. The licensing panel, in accordance with Rule 14 of the Licensing Act 2003, hearings regulations 205, decided to exclude the public from all parts of the hearing without the licensing panel considered that it's in the public interest to do so. This application, the Various Premises Licence Act 2003, I go over, invites, where are we? I go over to the Senior Licensing Officer for the introduction and outline of the application, please.
Chair, thank you, members. The matter before you this morning is an application to vary a premises licence under the Licensing Act of 2003, and the report in front of you is to provide information in order that yourselves can determine this application. In summary, an application pursuant to Section 34 of the Licensing Act 2003 has been made by Cookfield Golf Centre to vary the current premises licence at Cookfield Golf Course, Staplefield Road, Cookfield. A representation against this application has been made by an interested party on the grounds of prevention of a public nuisance. Now, the substance of the application to vary the licence is to, in fact, just vary the plan attached to the premises licence. Since the licence has been issued, the clubhouse has been remodelled and extended, and therefore there is a requirement to amend the plan that forms part of the licence to correctly reflect the licensed area. I would point out the applicant does not wish to vary any of the licensable activities or times, and the application and revised plan are Appendix 2, which I will lead the panel through subsequently. The panel are therefore asked to determine the application in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, the Mid Sussex District Council Licensing Policy, the Home Office guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, while having due regard to the applicant's submissions and relevant representations. Now, the background to the application is that the Golf Centre is the holder of a premises licence for Cookfield Golf Centre at the golf course, and this was issued under licence number PWA 321 and has been in force since the 7th of September 2006. There was a premises licence at the Golf Centre in an alternate building issued prior to this date under an earlier premises licence. I have attached the current premises licence and the current plan at Appendix 4, and there are some photos which I will lead the panel through of the new building. The current licence and licensing times are there for the reference of the panel, as there's no application to change any of those items. There are a number of mandatory conditions which are attached to the licence, and in addition to those, there are additional conditions which are set out at paragraph 8. Again, as part of the application, there's no application to amend or remove those conditions. As I stated, the application before the panel is to amend the current plan of the licensed premises to reflect the new layout and the area of the remodelled clubhouse. The variation doesn't request any changes to the licensable activities or permitted times, and I would point out the applicant has supplied further information regarding the remodelling, which is shown at Appendix 2. It should be noted that no representations have been received by any of the responsible authorities, which include the police, the Environmental Protection Team, and in fact planning. One representation has been received from a member of the public, which is referred to as an interested party within the Act. The main points raised within the representation that are relevant relate to the licensing objective of prevention of a public nuisance. The representation has not been resolved. I would point out at this point there was one other representation received during the consultation period, which was not accepted as it was not relevant and didn't address the likely effects of the variation on the licence. The application was correctly advertised at the site and also in the Mid-Sussex Times. I must stress that this hearing only concerns the likely effect of the variation on the licensing objectives, and the application cannot be used as a method of reviewing the current licence or, in fact, to revisit any previous planning applications. The one representation for an interested party is Mr. Gerald Conway, who's present. His representation is in full is appended to the report at Appendix 6. You will note that it details the email trail between his first contact with the licensing team, my subsequent reply, his subsequent detail that he supplied in respect of his representation, and my comments in respect of that. Within his representation, there are a number of points which relate to previous planning applications. You will see that I have explained to Mr. Conway that previous planning application matters are not a matter for this panel, and he must concentrate on the likely effect of the variation on the licensing objectives and not with any previous planning. I'm sure Mr. Conway will mention that or make comment during his submissions to yourself. In essence, he makes his representations on the grounds of a public nuisance, and it concerns the potential for increased public nuisance through the increased size of the clubhouse, and that a larger building, he states, will lead to more noise from a greater number of people and vehicles attending the location. As I state, within his further comments, he did attach a number of documents. They all relate to previous planning matters from 2005 and 2019, and that is why they haven't been added to your bundle, because they are not relevant. Now, the policy context, the determination of an application for a variation of a premises licence, the panel must determine, as stated, the application in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003, the Mid-Sussex District Council licensing policy, and the Home Office guidance which is issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act, whilst having due regard to the applicant's submissions and relevant representations. I've set out Section 34 of the Act for the panel, along with Section 35, which deals with the determination of the application. And obviously, if you have any questions regarding the legislation, Mr. Vickers, the solicitor, is here to answer any of your questions in that respect. The supplementary provisions, which are about determinations under Section 35, are detailed as well. Point 19 of the report deals with relevant representations. Now, the Licensing Act 2003 requires representations to address the 4 licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, the promotion of public safety, the prevention of a public nuisance, and the prevention of harm to children and young persons. And the Act also states that a representation is a relevant representation if it is about the likely effect of the grant or variation of the licence on the promotion of the licensing objectives. The objector must establish that such a consequence is a likely effect of the grant, i.e. more probable than not. I have set out for the panel the relevant parts of the guidance which is issued under section 182 of the Licensing Act. The point I would highlight to the members of the panel is in section 9.4 of the guidance, which states that for representations in relation to variations to be relevant, they should be confined to the subject matter of the variation. At 9.5 of the guidance, it's for the licensing authority to determine whether a representation, other than a representation from a responsible authority, is frivolous or vexatious on the basis of what might ordinarily be called considered vexatious or frivolous. A representation may be considered to be vexatious if it appears to be intended to cause aggravation or annoyance, whether to a competitor or other person, and vexatious circumstances may arise between disputes between rival businesses, etc. Licensing authorities can consider the main effect of the representation and whether any inconvenience or expense caused by it could reasonably be considered to be proportionate. And the guidance also states that it is recommended in borderline cases, the benefit of the doubt about any aspect of a representation should be given to the person making that representation. The subsequent hearing would then provide an opportunity for a person or body making a representation to amplify it. 9.37 of the statutory guidance states that as a matter of practice, licensing authorities should seek to focus the hearing on the steps considered appropriate to promote the particular licensing objective or objectives that have given rise to the specific representation and avoid straying into undisputed areas. A responsible authority or other person may choose to rely on their written representation. They may not add further representations to those disclosed to the applicant prior to the hearing, but they may expand on their existing representation and should be allowed sufficient time to do so. The guidance states that licensing authorities are best placed to determine what actions are appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives in their areas, and licensing determinations should be considered on a case-by-case basis. They should take into account any representations or objections that have been received from responsible authorities or other persons, and representations made by the applicant or premises user, as the case may be. The rest of the report deals with the other options which could be considered and other material implications. The final decision made by the panel in this matter is subject to an appeal in a magistrates' court by any party to the proceedings. If I lead the panel through the attached appendices, Appendix 1 is a copy of the application to vary the licence, and on page 19 they will find the plan of the new premises. Appendix 2 is further comments which have been supplied to the panel in respect of the application by the applicant. I won't go into detail with that because the applicant is here and will be able to provide that detail first-hand to the panel. Appendix 3 is an area plan giving some context as to where the Golf Centre is in relation to Cookfield. Appendix 4 gives the current premises licence, and at page 36 and 37 the panel will note that we have plans of the premises which were submitted back in 2005 with the issue of the initial licence, and I'm sure the panel will note how out of date they are. Appendix 5 is a series of photographs of the building, the first one being a frontal view of the entrance to the building. The second one is just inside the entrance to the left-hand side, and if you have reference with the submitted plan on page 19 of the pack. The next photograph is taken from the left-hand side of the entrance, where the panel can see the shop and the corridor leading to toilets and stairs to upstairs. The next photograph is from the entrance to the new bar area, and the subsequent next three photographs are from the entrance across to the right-hand side, which on the plan is marked the lounge area. Further photographs on page 42 is a photograph of the bar from the entrance to the patio area, and the next picture is across to the area which is marked as the function room on the plan. And then there are a series of photographs of the outside patio area. Appendices 6, as I've already mentioned, is Mr. Conway's representations in full, and that is the report before the panel this morning.
Thank you, John, for your... I invite the applicant to any questions for the officer, please.
For the licensing officer, no, I don't think so at this moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Conway, as the interested party, have you any questions for the officer?
No, Councillor, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got one, John, I think. Have there been any noise complaints to the environmental team?
Councillor, I checked this morning. The only noise complaint that I could find was one which was made in early 2019 to the Environmental Protection Team, when there was a specific request that the details of the person making the complaint wasn't disclosed to the golf centre.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Applebaum.
Thank you, Chair. John, can you actually identify, are there any other residential units near to the golf club? No, let me rephrase that. What's the nearest residential unit to the exterior of the golf club, please?
Councillor, yeah, led to believe that there are residences just to the left-hand side, to the entrance to the golf club. If you look at the area plan, just to the left-hand side, you'll see to the south of Staplefield Road, as I'm looking at the map, there are also residences in that area, and obviously residences towards Mill Hall Farm, which is indicated on the plan. So there are a number of residential premises within the area.
Okay, fine. And just to clarify that none of those residences have made representations regarding noise. Sorry, I'm not trying to lead you. Are you able to confirm if any have, please?
All I can say to the councillor is that only one noise complaint was received by Environmental Protection Team in 2019. Obviously, I'm not at liberty to disclose where it's from.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Any questions, Janice?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I will invite the applicants to make their representation, please.
So we took over the golf centre in 2018. It was already run as a golf club and had an awful lot of events, considerably probably noisier because most of them were run even in the winter using the marquee, which was very ill repair with the sides flapping. I mean, I've had reports that people were sat in the marquee so cold they had frost on their back. There was bands playing, DJs playing, and this was very regular. In fact, I've got a list of events here if you'd like to see them, panel. So when we bought it in 2018, we thought it was in such ill repair, we decided we'd like to make the building better, a safer, more compliant place to work for all of the staff involved, a nicer place for the members and also the general public, which is what we've done. Although the opponent is saying that the floor space is bigger for the licence, the only licensed area which we can use for the capacity of the actual guests is not much larger, and in fact includes an area which is all double glazed, and has soundproofing. In fact, during construction, we considered many elements to prevent a nuisance to the public. All the windows and bifold doors are double glazed and high tech. They're built to limit noise pollution. As you discovered, we haven't had one noise complaint or visit from the police, I'm a bit nervous. We've also had heavy curtains made for all the windows to consider all the local residents and to promote the licensing objectives. It's our policy not to have any younger birthday parties, i.e. 18th or 21st, as these run more risks. We have very stringent terms and conditions for all of our parties that we hold. As for saying that it's a misrepresentation for the last year of the parties due to COVID, I believe this as false. The next issue is the noise complaint that Mr. Conway says in his representation was June the 29th, 2019, which he believed, and there was also a video to be us. I have proof here, and I have one if anyone else would like to see. It was actually the rugby club. It was on their Facebook. So it was not us at all. Another thing I'd like to say is that there's also parish council events coming up at the rugby club where they're holding their events in a marquee with no walls or windows. So I don't believe us to be of any more threat to the general public or for any more of a nuisance, as we have considered all of this in everything that we've done and tried to avoid these being a nuisance to the public. Thank you.
Thank you for your application. John, have you any questions?
No, Chair, no questions from myself.
Mr. Conway, have you got any questions for the applicant?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Members of the panel? No. I just ask you that I see in Appendix 2, it says here you would even accept additional conditions like the time all windows and doors are closed, etc.
That is correct, although I would like to say last summer we had 2 or 3 weddings. They've all been on our Facebook. I have a list of events here with the windows and doors open, with DJs and band, and we had no noise complaints. So it would be a shame to do that.
Thank you. I invite Mr. Conway to make his representation, please.
Thank you, Councillor. My name is Gerald Conway and I'm a Cookfield resident living close to Cookfield Golf Centre. I'm attending today's panel hearing as an interested party. I'm concerned by the current application to vary the premises licence for Cookfield Golf Centre to include a substantial extension to its clubhouse. Before considering the application, I have concerns about MSDC's procedural approach. Dwellings close to the premises were not notified about this application. Other neighbours attempted to submit objections within the relevant time frame, but were not allowed to. When a request was submitted for them to appear at this hearing, they were not allowed to, or they were allowed to attend but forbidden to speak. Furthermore, parts of my objection have been withheld from the panel. In this regard, and to Mr. Bryant's comments, the attachments to my email illustrated the likelihood of public nuisance and did not attempt to revisit any planning matter for the avoidance of doubt. So, in summary, all of these procedural issues, in my opinion, are not in the public interest. Notwithstanding this, my neighbours that accompany me here today, they're Mrs. Caroline Groom of Upper Sparks Farm West, Mr. Paul Batchelor of Hammer Pond Farm, Mr. Ben Knowles of 1 Mill Hall Cottages. The first 2 dwellings are 100 metres to the south of the clubhouse, the third 280 metres away to its east, and mine 540 metres away to its northwest. These dwellings pre-existed Cookfield Golf Centre and lie in a tranquil rural location. Hammer Pond Farm has also received planning permission to use an outbuilding as an annex, which is situated 60 metres from the clubhouse. Our shared concerns relate to public nuisance. Between 1997 and 2006, Cookfield Golf Centre's premises initially included an 85 square metre reception area in a former agricultural building to the south of the current clubhouse. A separate clubhouse was then constructed around 2006, which had a floor area of 165 square metres and a 42 square metre terrace. The current owners bought Cookfield Golf Centre, as we've heard, in 2019. The clubhouse was extended to some 328 square metres of floor space in 2020, at which time its terrace was extended to 225 square metres. This process occurred over a protracted period between March 2019 and December 2021, when retrospective planning permission was granted for the extended clubhouse following a planning enforcement inquiry. The purpose of the above extension was in part to provide a party venue to third parties. Because Cookfield Golf Centre is not owned by its members, but by a closely held private company instead, a more intensive use of the premises can be expected to occur. The recent extension doubles the clubhouse's internal floor space. It also leads to a 5- to 6-fold increase in its terrace area. It should be noted that the clubhouse's terrace area is on its north side. Large doors have been inserted into the building's northern facade as part of the extension, which open onto this terrace. This increases the clubhouse's porosity in terms of noise, as well as creating greater interconnectivity between internal and external spaces. The ground falls away to the north of the clubhouse, increasing the scope for noise transmission over longer distances. The effect of the extension will be to significantly intensify the use of this building. This will be both in terms of its utilisation, due to it being suitable for a greater number of events on account of its size. Furthermore, the increased size of the building will lead to larger gatherings and hence more noise and disturbance. Residential properties are evidently located close to the clubhouse. Although the application to vary the premises licence does not propose to increase hours, the utilisation of the building within these permitted hours will increase, as will the noise generated when it is in use. The correlation between public nuisance and the size of the building used as a party venue is a straightforward point. It has been recognised by MSDC's own pronouncements in 2005, when considering what an appropriate size for the original clubhouse at Cookfield Golf Centre should be. Here it stated, the history of the Pax Hill course in Linfield shows that the use of the building will be put to is a function of its size. It is considered that if a building is larger than is necessary to provide the required facilities for the golf course, a more intensive use will be made of it than just golf. Conditions limiting use are ineffective once the size of the building has been agreed. In this case, and as noted here, there are residential properties in the vicinity which might suffer from an intensified use. I have been disturbed by noise from Cookfield Golf Centre's clubhouse. I have provided a recording of karaoke taken from my terrace, which appeared to come from it. This demonstrates the distance over which sound can travel from the clubhouse. I have also been disturbed by recorded music coming from it at night, which has prevented me from sleeping. I understand that my neighbours have also been disturbed by noise from the clubhouse. And had they been aware, in terms of Mr. Knowles and Mr. Batchelor about the licensing application, they have said that they would have actually submitted representations in relation to it. My neighbour Caroline has recently commented, the noise when it's loud vibrates into our houses and gardens, which disturbs us. With windows open from about May time to September, the noise will be more of a disturbance, particularly when we tend to go to sleep between 10 and 11 during the week and weekends. Noise from the customers slamming the car doors and chatting, even shouting across the car park after functions, car pulling out onto the road and more of them. Even emptying the glass bottles into the bins is a right noise, and they can do it a couple of times during a function each night. If I want to sit in my garden in the evening, I have to either listen to the music from the golf club or put my headphones in my ears to listen to my own. My neighbour Ben, whose house is passed by the B2115, along whose pavement partygoers from Cookfield Golf Centre walk back into Cookfield, recently commented, we have been disturbed by over the past years by parties at the golf club.
Mr. Conway, could I point out that you're the interested party and basically we're not interested in what your neighbours have said because they've never put in any complaints?
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, but
Okay, if I may, I just have three further sentences to say in relation to Mr. Knowles's comments, and then I will continue on with my main piece. Thank you, Councillor, for accommodating that. So Mr. Knowles has commented, we have been disturbed over the past years at the golf club. Drunk people walking past our house, shouting loud voices when party finished at 12-ish. 2, my son sleeps in the attic, can't open windows at night due to noise at parties, can also hear parties through windows anyway, and has to put out a fan on to block the noise. 3, sitting in our garden trying to have a barbecue meal outside, hearing music shouting from golf club. So in terms of Ms. Smythe has put forward a rebuttal in terms of my my objection to the licensing application, and I just wanted to talk to a couple of issues in relation to that. So turning to the sorry, thank you. So turning to the applicant's rebuttal of my objection, she claims that the increase in internal floor space is not as great as it would seem on account of the kitchen, bar, toilets and golf shop. However, these were also present in the clubhouse prior to its extension. In fact, if the licensable area of the extended clubhouse is considered, a proportionately greater increase of 2.4 times occurs. Furthermore, her arguments provide no comfort regarding the significantly extended external terrace area. She claims that the extension of the clubhouse allowed the replacement of a tent adjoining it, which had previously been used for events. However, the tent appears to have been a breach of planning control. Whatever noise and disturbance arose from this breach does not justify its perpetuation. The applicant implies that a blind eye should be turned towards public nuisance in favour of economic benefits. In the first place, such arguments do not justify public nuisance under the Licensing Act. And second, the applicant's own submissions for the extension of the clubhouse indicated that the full-time equivalent employees would only increase by 2 from 5 to 7. As regards the source of karaoke recorded on the 29th of June 2019, a Saturday, a newsletter sent by Cookfield Golf Centre that day stated, "We have had a busy month here at the club with private functions every weekend. After recording the noise and noting it appeared to come from the direction of the clubhouse, I went out to investigate whether it might be coming from elsewhere, such as the rugby club, which I did actually go to have a look at. But that did not seem to be the case. I'm thus unaware of any alternative explanation for the noise other than the one that Ms. Smythe has just given. But notwithstanding that, I would also note that I made a separate recording of an amplified recorded track by Alanis Morissette entitled "You Ought to Know," blaring out over the countryside from the direction of the clubhouse at 8:49 p.m. on the 22nd of June 2019, i.e. 1 week earlier. MSDC has intimated that because there have been no recent complaints to MSDC Environmental Health, no public nuisance could result from this licensing application. I disagree for several reasons. The first is that the applicant may moderate its behaviour ahead of making an application to vary the premises licence to increase the likelihood of the licence being granted. In this regard, I would also note that as above, between 2019 and 2021, the current applicant for this premises licence was also trying to obtain planning permission to extend the premises, which was also subject to a planning enforcement inquiry. The recent period is furthermore unlikely to be unrepresentative due to the effects of COVID. In addition, complaints about noise may not have been made to MSDC by neighbours to avoid souring relations with Cookfield Golf Centre. In any event, as the report to the committee notes in section 21, there is no requirement for a responsible authority or other person to produce a recorded history of problems at premises to support their representations, and in fact, this would not be possible for new premises. I contend in this case, given the substantial increase in the size of premises, that this is effectively new premises. At Cookfield Golf Centres, as Cookfield Golf Centre's premises have grown over time, its licence has not been amended to reflect the increasing potential for public nuisance. The evident lack of attention to this matter is demonstrated by the fact that the plan showing the licence area, which is attached to the current licence for Cookfield Golf Centre, alluded to by Mr. Bryant earlier on, bears no resemblance to the clubhouse prior to its extension. No resemblance. It is dated the 13th of May 2004, which is prior to the submission of the application for the original clubhouse in 2005. When the term of the current premises licence are compared to those of other golf courses in the district located in similar proximity to dwellings, such as Copthorne, Haywards Heath, Dyke and Pycombe, those of Cookfield Golf Centres are more likely to lead to public nuisance. Its opening activity hours run later, its non-standard timings allow more frequent extension, its licence is also devoid of conditions relating to the control of noise, the imposition of staff obligations, authorisations from Sussex Police, and the maintenance of CCTV. In conclusion, the officer's report to the panel states an objector must establish that the likely effect of the grant of the licence will address the licensing objectives. In this case, I contend that it has been adequately demonstrated that it would be more probable than not that the public nuisance will occur were this application to be permitted. In this regard, I point to the experience of noise and disturbance from the premises, the simple logic that significantly larger premises will inevitably lead to a more intensive use and thus greater noise and disturbance, and the comparatively lax terms of the current premises licence enjoyed by Cookfield Golf Centre. My neighbours and I did not choose to live next to a party venue. It chose to live next to us. It is thus now time that MSDC acted responsibly to protect the neighbourhood from public nuisance. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr Conway. Licensing officer, any questions to?
Chair, no questions, but I need to draw the panel's attention to a number of comments which Mr Conway made. Firstly, in respect of licensing matters, the panel will be aware that they are not circulated to local residents. They are just advertised at the site and also within the local newspaper. There is no requirement for them to be circulated any wider within the legislation, and in fact they're not circulated any wider. Also, the only representers that are allowed to make comment are ones who have had their representations accepted as being relevant. During the presentation from Mr Conway, he mentioned about Mr Knowles and Caroline Groom. Those are comments from people who have not made representations to the panel, which have been accepted, and therefore those comments should be disregarded because they don't relate to the person making the representation. The other point is, as I said during my presentation, the current premises licence is not under review and is not under consideration. The timings and the activities are not part of the consideration for the panel in this case. I would also point out that despite my comments during my introduction about planning matters being irrelevant, Mr Conway still read out extracts from details of planning submissions which were submitted back in 2005 and also in 2019, which again should be disregarded as being irrelevant by the panel. But obviously if the panel's needs further advice in respect of that, then they'll be able to consult with Mr Vickers, the solicitor, in that respect. But other than clarifying those points, Chair, I have no particular questions to direct to Mr Conway.
Thank you. The applicant, have you any questions to Mr Conway?
No additional comments.
Thank you. The panel. Councillor Bang.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Bryant, can I just double check that the other parties here that are not registered as interested parties, are you saying they didn't submit relevant representations, or but they didn't make them at all? In other words, did they actually make representations which were considered invalid in licensing terms?
There was only one other representation received from one of the parties who were present. That representation was not considered to be relevant. As with Mr Conway, I sent a similar email back to that person asking for further details and information which would potentially make the representation relevant by addressing the licensing objectives and the likely effect of the variation on the licensing objectives, but unfortunately I didn't receive any response from that person.
Thank you. And I've got one more question. I've got a few more, but I'll take them to the point at this moment. The premises have been altered, obviously, and so this is effectively a retrospective application. Can I ask actually at which point in time the current layout was implemented and started being used, please?
That would be a question best answered by the applicant to actually confirm when the new layout obviously was effective from.
Okay, thank you.
So the whole building wasn't completely finished when we first moved in September 21. So I would say it wasn't complete. In fact, it's still not completely finished now. So at least a year later, I would say, September 22. As in the ground floor was finished, but not the rest of the building in question for the rest of the floor space. So the ground floor, which we have the bar and the licence in, was finished.
Thank you.
Say it.
So, Chairman.
Yes, councillor Inman.
Yeah, Mr. Bryan, you said that the advertisement of this hearing was only on site or in the newspaper. What timescale is given for this, please?
Certainly, councillor. The timescales is that the application was advertised at the site from the 16th of February to the 15th of March. There was a notice displayed at the entrance to the site and also a notice displayed on the doors to the clubhouse. And it was also advertised in the Mid-Sussex Times on the 23rd of February 2023. The public consultation lasts for 28 days from the date following my acceptance of the application, and the publication in the newspaper has to occur within 10 working days of that acceptance, and both those timelines were complied with.
Thank you.
Paul Vick. Sorry,
If I can just clarify, in relation to the representations that have been made, under the Licensing Act 2003, Hearings Regulations 2005, Regulation 19 confirms that the authority, that is the panel under the authority, shall disregard any information given by a party or any person to whom permission to appear at the hearing is given by the authority which is not relevant to their application, representations or notice as applicable, or in the case of another person, the application, representations or notice of the party requesting their appearance, and the promotion of the licensing objectives. And there's a couple of other points there. Now, the licensing objectives are as set out in Section 4 of the Licensing Act 2003. They're in the bundle that you have, which is at page 8. And they confirm those four representations: prevention of crime and disorder, promotion of public safety, prevention of public nuisance, prevention of harm to children and young persons. We're only dealing with a representation in relation to prevention of public nuisance, and that is the only aspect that this panel ought to be giving consideration to. When we look at the guidance provided by, government under section 182, and I've got to get the right page, at paragraph, it's 14, I think it's 1464, refers to the issue in relation to planning and building control. Planning and licensing regimes involve consideration of different, albeit related matters. Licensing committees are not bound by decisions made by a planning committee and vice versa. However, as set out in Chapter 9, licensing committees and officers should consider discussions with their planning counterparts prior to determination with the aim of agreeing mutually acceptable operating housing scheme designs. That's in relation to new applications. As has been confirmed by Mr. Bryant early on in the meeting, there have been no representations received from any of the responsible authorities, so the police, environmental protection team and the planning team, which is particularly pertinent in the current circumstance. So I just want to make it abundantly clear what the legal framework is that the panel is making their consideration from, and unfortunately, despite the comments that have been made, anything that is not directly relating to the promotion or otherwise of the licensing objectives should be disregarded.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. Panel, have you got any more questions? And Mr Conway, that is, please. If not, I'll ask you after.
No, not about Mr.
I will invite the applicant to sum up, please. Have you got anything you want to say before we...
So, as I said before, the size of the floor space of the licensed area, as Mr Conway describes, we already had a kitchen, we already had a bar, we already had toilets. In fact, we did not have a disabled toilet. Our kitchen was literally like the size of 2 of these tables. It was not compliant, it was not safe to work in. It's now probably 12 times the size. And also the bar is also probably 12 times the size of the bar before. We used to have to wash up when we bought the building in a plastic bowl on top of the bar. It was not compliant, it was not safe to the general public. So actually also for health and safety reasons, if you want to get a good food hygiene level, like number 5, you're not allowed to walk past your toilets with any plates of food. It takes your food hygiene rating down. So we took a long time to lay out the building correctly to make it compliant and safe for the general public and for the people working there. That is why that area is so much larger. As I stated before, the licensed area, which holds the capacity of diners and in fact for events, is the same. It still has the same capacity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Panel, have any further questions before we retire? Councillor Band.
Thank you. It appears that there's been a lack of dialogue between interested parties, and I'm picking up on a few points regarding the complaints or alleged complaints and lack of recorded complaints. And I'm kind of cognizant that the applicants have owned the premises for well over 4 years, possibly 5, if the, I think 2018, I've written down that the club was taken over. So my book, we've got 2019, 2021 and 22 during their period of ownership, excluding the period in 2018 and indeed this year. So we've had 4 solid years. And we, as an authority, just to clarify, but in terms of clarifying what recent means, during that period, we have not received, as a licensing authority, any complaints regarding noise on the environmental team that are proven valid or relevant.
Councillor, as stated earlier, the only complaint which was received by the Environmental Protection Team was in 2019. There have been no complaints made direct to the licensing team, and the complaint in 2019, the informant didn't wish for their details to be disclosed to the Golf Centre.
Thank you. And just to clarify that there doesn't appear to be any mechanism in place, or it's certainly not evident to the committee, as far as I can see, that there's been any dialogue when these events are taking place between the business and the neighbours, or the neighbours and the business, such as a form of WhatsApp group or any mechanism to actually kind of facilitate dialogue or two-way dialogue or complaints process. And I'm asking that. The reason is that my background, I got as a resident behind the Broadway when that when the businesses opened up, it was very disturbing. But as a residents group, which was one of the reasons I was driven to actually come towards pursuing a more kind of prominent role in council, was that that developed, and it was only through dialogue and working with the businesses to make certain that we had a valid complaints process, and even to the extent that a complaint would be made, one of the residents would go around, have a dialogue with the bar and say, look, fine, we've resolved it, but a note will go to the licence department recording a note of this conversation. So there was an ongoing record of the issues, even if they weren't formal complaints, so that if it did escalate, you could go back. So what I'm hoping to do at some point before or after decision is made, if you're able, whilst we're here, to actually outline what the complaints process is for the residents, so that there's no misunderstanding for future events. And I would hope to see a more kind of convivial kind of dialogue between the business and the residents in terms of a WhatsApp group. So there is a noise, they can make a phone call and say, look, it's too noisy, turn it down, with a clear expectation that would happen. But as I said, in lack of complaints so far, it's difficult to actually kind of make a and at some stage, I'm sure that bottling out movements, they are identified in here, but there's no timing attached to them. And one of the issues I can recall was when bottles are put out, they haven't been mentioned so far, but when they're tipped out at 1 o'clock in the morning, it does tend to wake people up. But I'll leave it at that and see where it leads us. Thank you.
I will, but okay.
Can I just say that I think that's a great idea. We do have an answer phone on our telephones. If there were any noise complaints made, we would have picked up the answer phone message the next day. Or if anyone was to come in, we take that into account. Any band that plays or any DJ has to do sound checks beforehand, because obviously too loud music actually hurts people's ears. So they do actually have a limit to how loud they can play anyway. But we are very keen to work with our neighbours to not create a nuisance of ourselves. Thank you for listening.
I would just say in response to Councillor Levan's comment that in the past, and this is admittedly when the golf club was under previous ownership, one night I actually did go round there because I was woken up again by the noise, and I accosted the DJ to actually speak to him about the noise. He just wasn't interested. Just said, you know, that's all very interesting, mate. So, whilst I hear what you actually say, my experience in relation to these matters is that the best effective way to actually deal with them is through environmental health, because that is a sort of an official channel, and that is the way in which concerns can't, or neighbour concerns can't get brushed aside, will be dealt with effectively. Thank you. Paul.
Can we just clarify that that was under the previous ownership, so it's not relevant to the current premises licence? And I think it may also be relevant. How many complaints have you made to environmental health in relation to this, Mr. Conway?
In relation to this?
Yes,
I have not made any complaints in relation to environmental health. I haven't made any complaints to environmental health in relation to this because I don't believe that where we currently are is a representative run rate of the effective noise which can be expected from the premises, as I previously set out. There have been a number of issues which effectively distort the noise which can be expected from these premises. That is effectively why I have waited until this point, until we actually determined the position in relation to the licensing application, and either the panel determines that the licensing application is appropriate and admits it, or it doesn't. But my expectation is that if the licensing application is actually approved, then issues may result from that, which may lead to complaints to environmental health. Paul.
Just to clarify, it's not an application.
Sorry,
for
it's a
application,
variation.
variation in relation to premises licence only, but in relation to the layout of the premises only. Thank you.
Can I just ask John, I don't know if they still do it, but under my old local authority, that if we were getting problems with a premises, that the applicant or the environmental health could actually go into the premises, set up like a traffic light system to this sound, and so that, and it was set at a certain decibel from somebody local's premises, and if it went above that, the amber light would come on, and if it still carried on, the red light would come on, and if it still carried on, it cut out all the equipment completely. Do environmental still do that, or is that old?
What I would say, Chair, in respect of that is that the applicant, if they wish, could, if there was an issue identified, they could fit a noise limiter to their loudspeakers, which limited any output of noise to a particular decibel level, which would be agreed with the environmental protection team. And then if any DJ or band attempted to go above that, it would immediately be cut off. So there is that facility, but we are at the point where there have been very few complaints to the Environmental Protection Team. And I would urge the interested party and the other residents that if there are issues, that they address them, one, to the applicant, and two, to the Environmental Protection Team and the licensing team, because we follow up, like the Environmental Protection Team, allegations of where public nuisance is being caused to local residents. And quite often, and I totally agree with what Councillor Laban said, obviously premises and residents need to coexist together. And quite often premises have ways that the residents can contact them if there is an issue, so it can be addressed there and then. That may not be something for the panel at this time, but I certainly think it's probably something for the applicant and the interested parties to take away from here, to actually look to set up, to try and avoid breakdown of relationships between them and avoid local residents having to potentially suffer from loud music.
Any questions?
In relation to the bottles, we're more than happy at the end of events not to take them up to the recycling and do it in the morning within a certain time. So after, not too early, so it doesn't affect the local residents. Thank you.
You announced the panel. Paul?
Yeah, the panel members will now retire to deliberate and come to their decision.
Could I ask the applicant, officers and interested parties to wait in the council chamber, please? Right, thank you for waiting. We've come to a decision. We're going to grant the application, and the solicitor's going to give you the additional conditions.
So the panel's decision is to grant the application for variation of the premises licence, but with the additional conditions: windows and doors closed by 2300 hours, safe for entry and exit, external area not to be used after 2300 hours, and waste glass not to be emptied between 2200 and 0800. The final point made by the panel, is a suggestion only, is that the designated premises supervisor has a mobile phone with a widely publicised number in order to be contacted to address complaints at the time. Because if, for example, taking the point that Mr Conway made about the 29th of June and you've made about the 29th of June, your point is that it was Haywards Heath Rugby Club having an event. Mr Conway's point is that it was coming from the golf club. If, for example, he contacted the golf club and said, there's a noise, and the designated premises supervisor that night can look at it and go back and say, no, we haven't, and even perhaps ring Mr Conway and say, this is what's going on in the club at the moment. You might need to address it elsewhere, and it can be addressed straight away, because if you wait until the following day, you're not addressing the complaints promptly, you're causing friction, which, and the suggestion is you do it promptly, you can resolve any issues, and if it is coming from somewhere else, then that's something that can be looked at. And if it's coming from your own premises, that can be resolved. But that's a suggestion only, that's not a condition that's been made.
Do you notify them?
So the applicant, responsible authorities and interested party will be notified of the decision in writing, and I will try and get that out today, but it will be out as soon as possible. But obviously the post and the long weekend.
Do they have a right to appeal?
There's a right to appeal within 21 days to the magistrates' court if they feel that the decision is wrong, and that's something that can be addressed in due course. And I'll obviously confirm that in writing in the correspondence in due course. I think Mr Conway has a question.
Thank you, Councillor. Whilst I respect the panel's decision and thoughts in relation to this, in terms of the conditions which have been proposed, there is an obvious disparity in terms of the timings between the emptying of bottles, which goes up until 10 o'clock, and then the use of the terrace effectively and shutting the windows, which is at 11 o'clock. And I would ask for consideration to be given to bringing those conditions relating to the access to the terrace and also shutting the doors and the windows back to 10 o'clock as opposed to 11 o'clock. Thank you.
I don't think we can do that.
The panel have made their decision, and those are the additional conditions that they have imposed. It's clearly a matter where if there are complaints in relation to noise, the Environmental Protection Team are clearly available to be spoken to, and complaints should be registered with them. Equally, if you can contact the club so that there is a dialogue, I think that the panel certainly suggested that would be very much appreciated, because it can address the issues so that the friction or any friction between the residents and the club can be resolved.
Thank you.
All I'd like to say to my neighbours and everything, I've lived in Sussex all my life. I was born in Cookfield. Where I live, I run quite a large business. I've never had problems with my neighbours. Cookfield I've struggled with. I'm very approachable. You guys, I'm very approachable. I've seen you on the golf course, Mr Conway, and I've asked you to come up and have a chat. You totally refused. But I'm just trying to address that I'm there to be spoken to if they need to.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Right, we've had that decision, so I'm going to close the meeting at 11:20. Could you please remain seated until the live stream has ended?